Have you ever stopped to think about how quickly your life can turn upside down? I'm not talking about months, weeks, or even days. Sometimes it's a matter of seconds. Doing something completely normal, something you've done hundreds of times before, and suddenly everything changes. A choice you don't even realize you're making at the moment. An instinct that pushes you in a direction before your brain can process it. And when you finally stop to breathe, to understand what you've just done, it's too late. You've already crossed an invisible line. And on the other side of that line, nothing is the same anymore. She was closing the store. The same routine as always. Lock the front door, check the cash register, turn off the lights one by one. The kind of automatic movements your body performs while your mind is already elsewhere, thinking about the bill due tomorrow, your father's medication that's running out, the tiredness that never seems to go away no matter how many hours you sleep. The street was empty, silent in the way that only small towns become after 10 o'clock at night, almost peaceful, almost safe. And then she saw a man staggered down the side alley. It wasn't the kind of stagger a drunkard would stumble. It was something worse, something urgent. He leaned against the wall with one hand while the other pressed against his shoulder, and even from a distance, even in the dim light of the street lamp, she could see it. Blood, dark, slipping between his fingers, dripping onto the ground, leaving a trail that seemed to scream danger in a language she didn't want to understand. His breathing cut through the silence of the night, heavy, desperate, the kind of sound your body makes when it's fighting to keep functioning, when every second is a hard-won victory against something that wants to bring you down. And then he looked at her. Perhaps this sounds familiar. That moment when you look into someone's eyes and see something that paralyzes you. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't exactly fear. It was something more raw. It was someone at their absolute limit, with no options, no time, nothing but that last attempt. He said only one word. Hide. And she didn't think. She didn't have time to think. She didn't have time to weigh the consequences, to consider the risks, to wonder who that man was or what he was running from. Her body reacted before her mind could interfere. She opened the back door, the one that led directly to the dark, cramped storage room where she kept stock in empty boxes. She grabbed his arm, ignoring the warm blood that stained her palm, and pushed him inside. He stumbled, almost fell, but managed to get in. She locked everything. Door, window, everything that could be locked. Seconds later, she heard it. Footsteps, running, loud voices cutting through the quiet night. 3 men rushed past in the street, their faces contorted in a mix of anger and urgency. They shouted, they searched, they turned their heads in every direction like predators who had lost the trail of their prey. And she stood there, frozen in the front doorway of the shop, keys still in her hand, pretending to close it normally. As if her heart wasn't pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to burst from her chest. As if there wasn't blood drying on the palm of her hand. As if she hadn't just hidden a wounded fugitive in the middle of her own shop. One of the men looked directly at her. He paused for a second, and she felt the whole world freeze. Did he notice? Was there something on her face, some sign of guilt or nervousness, that screamed a lie? But then he just nodded, as if checking if she was all right, if he'd seen anything suspicious. And she nodded back, forced a small smile. The kind of polite smile you give strangers when you don't want to talk. And it worked. He kept running, following the others, disappearing into the darkness of the street. Only then did she breathe. Only then did she allow her legs to tremble. The reality of what she had just done to fall upon her like a dead weight. She had hidden someone. Someone who was bleeding. Someone who was being chased by at least 3 men who seemed willing to do anything. And she had no idea who he was. Stay with me until the end, because what she didn't yet know at that moment would change absolutely everything. She entered the store, locked the front door, and stood in the middle of the dark space, trying to process, trying to understand. But the only thing she could feel was the still warm blood on her palm, and the growing, silent terrifying certainty that she had just made a decision she couldn't undo. And now he needed to find out exactly what he had done. She stood there for too long, staring at the warehouse door as if it were a bomb about to explode. Part of her wanted to run away, lock the shop from the outside and leave, pretend nothing had happened, leave the man inside to sort out his own problems. But she knew she couldn't, not because she was brave, far from it, but because she had seen the blood. She had seen the despair in his eyes. And if she simply left, if she left him there, bleeding in the dark, she knew she would never be able to look in the mirror again without seeing a coward. So she did the only thing that seemed to make sense at that moment. She grabbed the first aid kit she kept under the counter, filled a bottle with water, and went to the storage room door. Her hand trembled as she turned the key in the lock, not from fear, exactly, but from the absolute awareness that she was about to cross another line. Because until that moment, I could still pretend it had been an impulse, that I had acted without thinking. But opening that door again, going in there with water and bandages, that was a choice. That was a conscious decision to remain involved. She opened it. The warehouse was dark, with only a sliver of light from the street coming through the high window. It took her a few seconds to adjust her eyes, and when they did, she saw him. He had leaned against the far corner, his back to the wall, in a position that gave him a full view of the door. Even wounded, even bleeding, he had positioned himself tactically. And that should have been the first sign. It should have made her stop and question. But it didn't, because at that moment, all she could see was a wounded man who needed help. "I brought water," she said, her voice lower than she intended. "And something to clean this up," pointed to his shoulder, where blood had completely soaked his shirt. He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her with an intensity that made her want to back away, as if he were calculating, measuring, deciding if she was a threat or an ally. And then, finally, he nodded. A small movement of his head. Permission. She approached slowly, kneeling beside him. Up close, she could see better. The wound was bad. Not fatal. At least it didn't seem so, but it needed real treatment, not the basic bandages she had. "You need a hospital," she whispered. "I can't," he replied. His voice was hoarse, tired, but there was firmness there, determination. "It's not safe. Safer than bleeding to death in a warehouse." He almost smiled. "Almost. You don't understand. If I go to the hospital, they'll find me. And if they find me, I'll die anyway. And probably you too." Her stomach sank. "Me? Why me?" "Because you helped me. Because they saw you. And if they find out you know something, they'll want to make sure you don't talk." He paused, taking a deep breath as if each word required effort. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dragged you into this, but I had no choice." If you're feeling the same tightness in your chest that she felt at that moment, leave a like so I know that this story is touching you the same way it touches me when I tell it. This helps Heart of Protection Stories continue bringing narratives that speak directly to the feeling that touch something real inside us. She stood there, processing it all, trying to understand how she'd gone from closing the store normally to kneeling in a dark warehouse with a bleeding fugitive who had just told her she was in danger now, too. None of it made sense. None of it seemed real. And yet, it was. Terribly, undeniably real. "Who are they?" she finally asked. "Dangerous people." That's not an answer. He looked at her, really looked, and there was something in that look that made her realize he was debating how much to tell her, how much she deserved to know after risking everything to save him. "Do you want the truth?" he asked. "The truth is, the less you know, the safer you'll be." "I think that ship has already sailed," she replied, pointing to his bloodied shoulder, and then to her own stained hand. "So tell me, who are you? And who are you running from?" He took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight he had been carrying for too long. But before he could answer, they heard it. Footsteps outside, low voices. Someone trying to open the front door of the store. Their eyes met, and in that silent second, She understood. They had returned. And this time, they weren't just passing through. They were searching. Their eyes met. And in that silent second, she understood. They had returned. And this time, they weren't just passing through. They were searching. He put a finger to his lips, asking for absolute silence. She nodded, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure anyone outside could hear the footsteps drew closer. Someone was testing the front door, pulling the handle, checking if it was locked. And then a voice, muffled by the distance and the thick wooden door, but still audible. "Are you sure you saw him coming this way?" "Definitely. He couldn't have gone far with that injury. He has to be hiding somewhere around here." She held her breath. They knew. They didn't know exactly where, but they knew he was nearby. And if they decided to break in, if they decided to search every shop on the street, it would only take minutes to find him. She looked at him, searching for some instruction, some sign of what to do. But he only shook his head slightly. "Wait, don't move, don't make a sound." The footsteps faded, the voices grew faint, and then silence. A silence so heavy it seemed to have a texture, pressing against her eardrums like deep water. She waited. He waited. Neither dared to move for long minutes that felt like hours. Finally, he relaxed a little. "They're gone. For now." His voice came out low and hoarse. "But they'll be back. They'll search every establishment. It's just a matter of time." She swallowed hard. "So what do we do? Us? There is no us. You're leaving, going home. And if anyone asks, you didn't see anything, you don't know anything, and you'd stay here until I can move without leaving a trace of blood. Then I'll disappear, and you'll never hear from me again." She should have been relieved. She should have accepted that easy way out, that permission to return to normal life and pretend nothing had happened. But something inside her rebelled against it. "You're going to die," she said bluntly. "You can't even stand up straight. How are you going to escape them? That's not your problem. It became my problem the second I decided to hide you." She stood up, wiping her blood-stained hands on her pants. "Be quiet. I'm going to get more things. Food, real medicine, something that will do better than this." She pointed to the pathetic first aid kit she had brought. "No," he said, trying to stand up as well, but giving up when the pain made him tremble. "You don't understand the risk. These people don't play games. If they find out you helped me, they'll make you pay. And if I leave you here to die, I'll make myself pay for it for the rest of my life." She looked at him with a firmness that surprised them both. "You don't know me. You know nothing about me. But I work 16 hours a day to keep this shop afloat on my own since my father became too ill to help. Exhaustion has become my constant companion. The fear of losing the only income we have is greater than any tiredness. And I live in such a mechanical routine that each day is the same as the last. I wake up, work, take care of my father, sleep, and it repeats, 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 until you forget there's another way to live." This is where the story begins to show what is really at stake. She took a deep breath, the words coming from a place she didn't even know existed. And you know what that does to you? It makes you invisible. It makes you feel like nothing you do really matters. That you're just another cog in a giant machine that doesn't stop for anyone. But when I saw you there, bleeding, desperate, something inside me reacted. It wasn't logic. It was instinct. Because I recognize despair when I see it. I've spent too many years caring for someone who's dying slowly, not to recognize when someone else is at their breaking point. He was now observing her with a different kind of attention, as if he were truly seeing her for the first time, not as a complication, not as a risk, but as a person. "Spending years caring for a sick father taught me one thing," she continued. "Sometimes you help first and ask questions later. Because if you wait to have all the answers before acting, the person has already died while you were deciding. And maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just tired of feeling like nothing matters, and saving someone, even without knowing who, even without knowing why, finally seems to matter. Finally seems to make a difference." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was recognition. It was him understanding that she wasn't doing it out of naivete. She was doing it because that's who she was. And there was no argument that could change that. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Soon, Mara," he repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. "I'm Carter. Hi, Carter." She almost smiled. Almost. "Now that we've introduced ourselves, are you going to let me really help you? Or are you going to keep pretending you can do this on your own?" He looked at his wounded shoulder, at the blood that had stopped flowing but still stained everything around it. He looked at his own hands, trembling from the effort of staying conscious. And then he looked back at her. "Are you sure? Because if you do this, if you really help me, there's no going back. You become a part of this. And that could cost you everything." "It's already cost me my peace of mind," she replied. "So maybe it's worth going all the way, and at least having the satisfaction of having tried to save someone." She paused. "So, will you accept help, or will I have to force you?" And for the first time since he'd entered that warehouse, Carter smiled. It was small, tired, but genuine. "You're stubborn. I have to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived this far." She held out her hand. "So, do we have a deal? I'll help you not to die, and you'll stop trying to send me away." He looked at her hand, at his blood still staining her fingers. And then, slowly, he held it. "I wake up," he comments. This story could be real. He held her hand for a second longer than necessary, and when he let go, there was something different in the air between them. Not complete trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The possibility. Mara left the warehouse and went straight to the back of the store where she kept her personal belongings. She had an old backpack there, and she started filling it with anything that might be useful. More water, the granola bars I kept for when I didn't have lunch, the extra jacket he left hanging for cold nights. And then she remembered, she had antibiotics at home, leftovers from her father's last infection. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. She checked the street through the window before going out. Empty, silent. But now, that quiet didn't seem peaceful. It seemed threatening, as if at any moment someone could appear from the shadows. She locked the shop, keeping the lights off so as not to attract attention, and walked quickly the 3 blocks home. Every sound made her jump. Every shadowy movement made her quicken her pace. She arrived home without incident. Her father was asleep, as he always was at that hour, aided by the pain medication that left him dizzy and distant. She grabbed what she needed, left a note saying she had returned to the store to finish the inventory in case he woke up, and left again. When she returned to the warehouse, Carter was exactly where she had left him. But something was different. He had taken off his jacket, and now she could see clearly the blood-stained shirt, the wound on his shoulder that looked worse in the light than it had in the dark. And then she saw what seemed simple begins to reveal layers that no one expected. Beneath his torn shirt, he wore a vest. It wasn't an ordinary vest. It was a bulletproof vest. Tactical. The kind she'd only seen in movies or on the backs of police officers during operations. And it wasn't intact. It had marks, impact marks. Recent ones. As if I'd stopped bullets very recently. She stood there, processing it all. His injury wasn't from a regular fight. It wasn't a knife. It wasn't an accident. It was a gunshot. Someone had shot him. And the vest had saved his torso. But the bullet in his shoulder had passed through, where the protection didn't cover. And the way he was positioned now, even wounded, even weak, was too well trained to be casual. Back to the wall. Full line of sight to the door. Even in his vulnerable state, he maintained a tactical posture, as if it were second nature. As if he had done it so many times that his body reacted automatically. "You're a police officer," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Carter tensed. He didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it. He just looked at her, waiting to see what she would do with that information. "The vest," she continued, pointing. "The way you move. Everything. You're not a common criminal. You're a police officer. She paused, her brain racing. But if you're a police officer, why are you running? And why are they hunting you? He took a deep breath, and she saw the struggle unfolding on his face, deciding how much to tell, how much to risk. And then, finally, he gave in. Grab that, he said, pointing to the jacket on the floor, left inside pocket. She picked up the jacket, feeling its unexpected weight. It probably had more protection sewn into the fabric. She found the pocket and put her hand inside. Her fingers touched cold metal. She pulled a badge, silver, polished, featuring a 6-pointed star and the words engraved, Sheriff, North County. Her world turned upside down. Are you sheriff? It was, Carter corrected, until I discovered that half my own department was working for the criminal organization. I was investigating, until I realized that the men I trained, the men I trusted, the men I called brothers, were corrupt. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. And when I found out, when I gathered enough evidence to expose them all, they came to kill me. Not criminals. My own men. Mara sat heavily on a nearby box. This was much worse than she had imagined. Much more complicated. The men who were chasing you. Corrupt police officers. Using real badges. Official cars. All the authority the system gives them. And using all of that to protect criminals and eliminate anyone who threatens their operation. He looked at the badge in her hand. That's why I can't go to the hospital. That's why I can't trust anyone in the system. Because I don't know who's been bought and who isn't. She looked at the badge, then at him, and something clicked. The men who came here earlier. When you said they were dangerous, were they police officers too? 3 of them are detectives who worked under my command. Men I would have given my life to protect. The bitter irony was clear. And now they're trying to take mine to protect the scheme they've set up. Her blood ran cold. Because this changed everything. It was no longer about hiding a fugitive from criminals. It was about hiding an honest police officer from corrupt police officers. And if they found out, if they came knocking on her door asking, they would come with badges and authority and all the tools the system gave them. How could she say no? How could she refuse without raising suspicion? Do you understand now? Carter asked. Do you understand why I told you to leave? Why this is more dangerous than you imagined? Because we're not talking about criminals you can report. We're talking about people who have the power to arrest you, to investigate you, to legally destroy your life. And they'll do it if they think you know something. She understood God, how she understood. This wasn't a movie. There was no hero arriving to save the day. It was harsh reality where sometimes badges protected criminals and honest people died trying to do what was right. And she had just placed herself right in the middle of it. But at the same time, looking at Carter there, seeing the weight he carried not only in his bruised shoulder but in his eyes, she realized something. He hadn't come to her out of malice. He hadn't chosen to put her in danger for pleasure. It had been pure desperation. And he recognized that because he had seen enough desperation in the mirror in recent years. And now? She asked, her voice calmer than she felt. What are you going to do? Survive until you can make contact with someone on the outside? Someone who isn't bought? Feds, maybe? Someone who can investigate without being involved in the local scheme. He paused. And you'll go back to your life. You'll pretend you never saw me. You will. Stop trying to send me away, she interrupted. We've already passed this point. Remember? Dio. She opened her backpack, taking out the antibiotics. Now be quiet and let me take care of this before it gets infected. From that moment on, everything begins to change silently. Because what Mara didn't know, while carefully cleaning his wound, was everything that had gone through Carter's head before he knocked on that door. He had seen her closing the shop from afar, dragging herself through the alley, trying not to faint. He had realized 3 things in seconds. She was alone. She was tired. And she had that kind of presence that hadn't yet been completely broken by the world. He knew he was putting her at risk the second he opened his mouth to ask for help. He knew he was using her vulnerability, her kindness, as a tool for survival. And he hated it. He hated that the situation had forced him to drag an innocent woman into something that could kill her. But he had no choice. The operation had gone completely wrong. He had spent months infiltrating informants, gathering evidence, building a solid case against the corruption network that had infected the department like a cancer. And then, that night, he had arranged the final meeting with the key informant, the man who had enough evidence to take everyone down. But when he arrived at the agreed location, he realized, trap, the informant had turned, or had always been one of them. And now half the corrupt department was there, waiting to silence him before he could expose them all. He had miraculously escaped. The vest had saved his torso when the first shots came, but the bullet in his shoulder had passed through his unprotected side, and then it was a run. A desperate escape through dark alleys, losing blood, knowing that every second diminished his chances. When he saw Mara, he realized she was his only option, and he used that. He used the fact that Mara was alone, vulnerable, clearly exhausted from a long day at work. He used the kind of naive kindness that still believes in helping strangers even when the world has proven 1,000 times that it's dangerous. Survival left no room for scruples. You do what you have to do, and you deal with the guilt later, if you live long enough to feel it. But what he didn't expect was her return. When she appeared in the warehouse with water and clean cloths, with that genuine care in her eyes, even with the visible fear trembling in her hands, something inside him broke. Because he had seen too much bad. He had seen men who swore to protect and serve selling badges for money. He had seen corruption so deep that it seemed impossible to cleanse. And he had begun to believe that true goodness no longer existed, that everyone had a price. But there she was, unaware of who he was, unaware that the badge hidden in his pocket proved he was sheriff, unaware that by saving him, she had become a target as well. She was only helping because it was what she thought was right, and that destroyed him in a way no bullet ever could. You're trembling, Mara said, bringing him back to the present. Is it pain or a fever? Both, probably. He tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. I'm sorry for all of this, for getting you into this, for not being honest from the start. You were bleeding and running from people trying to kill you. She replied while carefully administering antibiotics. I guess complete honesty wasn't a priority. Even so, you deserved to know what you were getting into before deciding to help me. She stopped, looking directly into his eyes. What if I had known? If you had come and said, I'm a corrupt sheriff running from justice, or I'm an honest sheriff running from corrupt colleagues, do you think my response would have been different? You were dying. And I'm not the kind of person who lets someone die just because the situation is complicated. Carter realized at that moment that he had been completely wrong. He had thought it was naive kindness, but it wasn't naivete, it was strength. It was someone who had seen so much pain, cared for so much fragility, that she had developed a compassion that wouldn't be broken by fear. That was far more dangerous than innocence, because you can dissuade innocence with facts, but strength of conviction, that doesn't back down. You're stubborn, he said for the second time. And you're stubborn, she replied. Now stop talking and let me finish this before my fever gets worse. He obeyed, letting her work. And for the first time since the operation had exploded, since he had realized he was alone against an entire system, he felt something akin to hope. Not because he thought he would survive. The odds were still dire. But because he was no longer completely alone. And that, in some strange and unexpected way, made all the difference. He comments, I saw that truth too. Mara finished cleaning and bandaging the wound as best she could. It wasn't professional work, but it would do until he could get real help. She gave him the antibiotics with water, instructing him on the dosage, and then sat leaning against the opposite wall, finally letting her exhaustion show. You need to rest, Carter said. It's going to be dawn in a few hours. And you have to open the store as usual, act like nothing happened, And you? I'll stay here, quiet, invisible. He paused. And as soon as I can move without risking reopening the wound, I'll leave. I'll get you out of this. She wanted to argue. Wanted to say that he wasn't in any condition to go anywhere. But the truth was, they both knew that the longer he stayed there, the greater the risk to her. So she just nodded and left, locking the storage room from the outside and returning home with the weight of it all pressing on her shoulders. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the consequence of her act of kindness didn't take long to arrive. The next morning, when she opened the shop as usual, trying to maintain her normal routine, they appeared. Two men. Discreet suits, confident posture, badges visibly hanging from their belts. They entered as if they owned the place, looking around with that meticulous attention that made every object seem suspicious. "Good morning," the taller one said, smiling slightly but not reaching his eyes. "We're investigators from the department. We're looking for information about an incident that happened last night in this area." Mara felt her heart race, but she kept a neutral face. Years dealing with difficult clients had taught her to hide her emotions. "Of course. How can I help? Were you here last night? Around 10:30? I was closing the store." "Why?" The other man, shorter but with sharper eyes, approached the counter. "Did you see anything strange? Anyone running, hiding, any unusual movement?" She shook her head, maintaining a casual tone. "No. I was busy organizing the cash register and locking everything up. When I finished, I went straight home." The street was empty. They exchanged a glance. They didn't quite believe it. She could see it in the way they kept watching, how their eyes swept every corner of the store, checking, searching, investigating. It wasn't a casual question. It was a disguised interrogation. "Do you live far from here?" the taller one asked. 3 blocks, and he went straight there. Didn't stop anywhere. Didn't go back to get something he'd forgotten. The tone was casual, but the question was a trap. They were testing her, seeing if she would change the story. "Straight home," she repeated firmly. "Why did something serious happen?" "We are investigating a dangerous suspect who has been seen in this area," the sharp-eyed man replied. "If you see anything strange, anyone you don't recognize, it's important to notify us immediately, for your own safety." "Sure," she said, taking the card he offered. "I'll call if I see anything." They stayed a few more minutes, asking seemingly random questions about the neighborhood, the street traffic, whether she had security cameras. And each question was a probe, trying to find inconsistencies, trying to catch her in a lie. But she kept the story simple and consistent. And finally, they left. Before leaving, the taller one paused at the door. "If you remember anything at all, call us. It's important." The tone wasn't a request. It was a veiled threat. It was a warning. Mara waited until they were out of sight. Then she locked the shop door, flipped the sign to closed, and sat behind the counter, her legs trembling. She had lied to the police. She had obstructed an investigation. And she knew they hadn't completely believed her. That's when she saw it. On the floor, near the door, something that hadn't been there before. A photograph. Folded, as if it had accidentally fallen from a pocket. But nothing about it was accidental. She picked it up, unfolded it, and felt her blood run cold. It was her, leaving the store. The night before. The photo had been taken from a distance, probably from a car parked on the street, and it clearly showed the time in the corner, 10:47 p.m., exactly when she had returned home after picking up supplies. Exactly when she had lied about already being home. They knew. They had left the photo on purpose. Not as proof, not yet, but as a message. As a way of saying, "We know you lied. We're watching. And if you keep lying, we'll get you." She was in the crosshairs now, officially. And there was no turning back. Every decision from then on would be a conscious choice. To continue hiding Carter, or to turn him in and try to save her own skin. But saving her own skin meant condemning a man who had risked everything to do what was right. It meant giving in to corruption. It meant becoming an accomplice by omission. She tucked the photo into her pocket and went to the storage room. Carter was awake, alert despite the fever she could see glistening in his eyes. "They came," she said, bluntly, "to investigators. They asked questions. They left this." She showed him the photo. Carter took it, examined it, and his jaw tightened. "They marked you. This is an intimidation tactic. They want you to know they're watching you, that they know you lied. The next step is to take you in for formal questioning, to pressure you until you break." He looked at her with something akin to guilt mixed with admiration. "You still have a chance to get out of this. You can go to them now. Say you remembered something, hand me over. They'll be angry that you lied, but they'll let it go if you cooperate, and you all die, but you'll be safe." He said it as if it were simple, as if his own sacrifice were an acceptable price to pay. Mara stared at him for a long moment, at the man who had entered her life like a bloody ghost begging for help, and who was now offering his own life to protect her from consequences she herself had chosen to accept. And something inside her solidified. Decision. A line in the sand. "No," she said, simply and firmly. "I'm not going to do it. Soon. No," she repeated, louder this time. "You don't understand. I've spent years of my life just existing. Waking up, working, taking care of my father, sleeping, repeating. And in all that time, I never felt like I was really making a difference. But now I have the chance to do something that matters. To protect someone who is trying to do what's right, even when everyone around them is corrupt. And you want me to give that up? To hand you over and go back to my safe, empty little life?" Carter tried to stand up, but the pain made him stop halfway. "You don't know what you're saying. This isn't a movie. This is real life, where people die. I know exactly what I'm saying." She lowered herself, getting to his eye level. "And maybe for the first time in a long time, I'm truly alive, instead of just surviving. So stop trying to protect me by making decisions for me. I choose to stay. I choose to help you. And I'll deal with the consequences." What seemed simple begins to reveal layers that no one expected. Because, at that moment, seeing the absolute determination in her eyes, Carter realized something he had been trying to ignore from the beginning. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't a fragile piece that needed to be protected from the truth. He was someone who had seen the truth and chosen to face it head-on. And that changed everything. "Okay," he finally said. "Then at least let me tell you everything. The whole truth. So you know exactly what you're dealing with." She sat down, ready to listen. Carter took a deep breath. "My full name is Carter Hayes. I've been sheriff of the North County for 6 years. Before that, I was a detective for 8, and I always believed in the system. I believed the badges meant something. That we were the good guys. That we protected the right people and arrested the wrong ones." He paused bitterly. "And then I started noticing things, little things at first. Cases that were closed too quickly. Evidence that disappeared. Witnesses who changed their testimonies overnight. And when I started investigating on my own, I discovered the truth." Mara listened in silence as he continued, his voice growing heavier with each word. "There's a criminal organization operating in the region for years. Drug trafficking, money laundering, extortion. And they've infiltrated the system from within. They've paid off police officers, judges, prosecutors. They've built such a deep network that they can operate openly because they control who investigates and who prosecutes." He looked directly at her. "The men who approached you today, they're real police officers, real badges, real authority, but they work for the organization. They protect criminals and eliminate anyone who threatens the operation. And you figured all this out by yourself?" "No, I had an informant. Someone inside the organization who wanted to leave, who had enough information to take everyone down. I spent months protecting him, gathering evidence. And last night, we were going to make the final transfer of evidence to the feds." He closed his eyes as if the memory physically ached. But it was a trap. The informant had turned, or he'd always been one of them from the beginning. And when I arrived at the agreed location, half of my own department was there waiting to kill me. How did you escape? Lucky. And the vest. The first shots hit my chest, and the vest held. I took advantage of the confusion to run, but a bullet hit my shoulder where there was no protection, and then it was just escape, until I got here. Until I got to you. Mara processed it all. The magnitude, the danger, the fact that she was literally hiding a sheriff, fleeing from other police officers. And now, what's the plan? Make contact with federal agents from abroad. People who have no connection to the local system. Pass them everything I managed to gather. Before the trap. And pray that they believe me and act quickly enough, before the corrupt ones manage to bury everything. He looked at her intently. But for that, I need to survive long enough, and you need to keep looking innocent. Because the second they confirm you're hiding me, they'll arrest you. And in a cell, surrounded by corrupt cops, you don't stand a chance. So, we pretend everything's normal, she said, thinking aloud. I open the shop every day. I act like I always have. And you stay here, hidden, until you manage to make contact. Exactly. But Mara, he held her wrist, gently but firmly. If at any point you feel you're in real danger, that they're about to catch you, you hand me over. Don't hesitate. Your life is worth more than my mission. She looked at his hand holding her wrist. It was the first time he had touched her in a way that wasn't a medical necessity. And there was something about that touch that went beyond professional protection. There was genuine care, real concern. As if at some point in the last few hours, she had ceased to be just the woman who saved him, and had become someone he couldn't imagine sacrificing. I'll think about it if it gets to that point, she said, making no promises. Now you need to rest. The fever hasn't completely gone down yet. Write in the comments. I understand that pain. She left the warehouse, leaving him there with thoughts that weighed more heavily than any injury. And during the following hours, while she attended to customers and feigned normalcy, Carter remained there alone, facing a conflict that had no easy answer. From that moment on, everything begins to change silently. Because every minute he spent in that warehouse was a decision being made. He had two choices. He could leave immediately. He could wait until dawn, when the streets were deserted, and crawl to some place where he could contact federal agents. He had numbers memorized, emergency protocols. If he could reach a secure phone, he could call for outside help before the corrupt agents found him. But doing that meant abandoning Mara. It meant leaving her alone to deal with the consequences of having helped him, and he knew exactly how that would end. The men who had visited her weren't amateurs. They were trained professionals who knew exactly how to break people. They would come back, they would ask more questions, they would apply more pressure. And eventually, when they realized she was hiding something, they would take her in for formal questioning. And in an interrogation room, surrounded by corrupt police officers with no moral boundaries, she wouldn't stand a chance. If they thought she knew something important, they would torture her until they were sure. They wouldn't leave obvious marks, of course. They were too professional for that, but they had methods. Sleep deprivation, psychological pressure, threats to her sick father. And if she broke down, if she told everything, they would kill her. Anyway, witness eliminated. Problem solved. But even if she didn't break down, even if she managed to stick to the story, they'd probably kill her, just in case. Because desperate men don't leave loose ends. And she was a huge loose end. Someone who'd been in the right place at the wrong time, and now knew too much, just by association. Carter knew these men. He had worked with some of them for years. He had trained some of them. And he knew exactly what they were capable of when they felt threatened. He had seen how they operated, how they made people disappear, how they staged scenes to look like suicide or an accident, how they manipulated investigations to protect themselves. So the choice was clear. Technically, he should stay. He should protect her for as long as he could. He should use his experience, his skills, to keep her alive until he could expose everything. But that choice also came at a cost. because every hour he stayed there increased the risk for her. The corrupt men knew he was injured. They knew he couldn't have gone far. They were systematically searching the area. It was only a matter of time before they thought to search the shops more thoroughly. And when they did, when they found him there, Mara would be arrested as an accomplice. She would be accused of obstructing justice, of harboring a fugitive, of complicity in whatever they decided to invent. And even if he managed to protect her physically, even if he managed to fight his way out, if they were discovered, what would happen then? She would become a fugitive too. She would lose everything. The shop, the house, the ability to care for her father. Everything she had struggled to keep functioning on her own would be destroyed because he had dragged her into it. So, what was the answer? To stay and protect her, risking both of them dying or losing everything. Or to leave, try to save the operation, and condemn her to face alone men who would show no mercy. He had sworn to oaths in his life. One when he became a police officer, to protect and serve innocent citizens, to put their lives above his own. Another when he became sheriff, to uphold the law, to expose corruption, no matter the personal cost. And now, those two oaths were at war. Because protecting Mara meant possibly sacrificing the only chance to expose the corruption network. And exposing the corruption meant sacrificing her. Carter looked at the badge in the backpack beside him. That piece of metal that had meant everything to him for so many years. That represented justice, order, the triumph of right over wrong. But now it seemed like just cold metal. Because what good was abstract justice if it cost the life of someone specific? Of someone who had shown more integrity in a few hours than most men with badges showed in entire careers. And I was looking at that young woman through the crack in the door, seeing her attend to customers with a tired but genuine smile, seeing the silent strength that kept her functioning even under pressure she shouldn't even be facing, that Carter understood something fundamental. The right choice, the choice that would save more people, expose more criminals, and achieve more justice in numerical terms, was to sacrifice her. It was to treat her as acceptable collateral damage in a larger war. But he couldn't do it. He simply couldn't, because she wasn't a statistic. She wasn't a number in a report. She was a real person who had saved him when she shouldn't have, who had risked everything out of pure kindness, who deserved protection more than any case deserved to be closed. So he made the choice that was probably wrong in professional terms, that would possibly cost the entire operation. But it was the only one he could live with. He was going to stay. He was going to protect her. And if that meant letting criminals escape, if it meant that corruption would continue for longer, then so be it. Because saving one good person was worth more than punishing 1,000 bad people. The days that followed created a strange, intense routine. Mara opened the store every morning, attended 2 customers with the same professionalism as always, and closed at night. And during all this time, Carter was in the stockroom, hidden away, slowly recovering. She brought him food, water, medicine. She changed his bandages. And little by little, between these stolen moments of care and whispered conversation, something changed. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. She didn't trust him because of the badge. Badges could be faked far too easily. Stories could be well-told lies. In theory, everything he'd said could be the elaborate manipulation of a clever criminal. But there were things that couldn't be faked. Small gestures that revealed character more than any words. Like the way he insisted she eat first when she brought food. She always brought something they could share, and every time he pushed most of it onto her, saying he'd already eaten, that he wasn't hungry, that she needed to conserve her strength, even when it was obvious he was starving, that his body was struggling to recover and needed nutrition. Even so, she came first. Or how he checked the door every time he heard any noise, no matter how small. A car passing on the street, footsteps on the sidewalk, the wind hitting something against the wall. Every time, he instinctively positioned himself between her and the source of the sound, even wounded, even knowing that in a real fight he wouldn't be able to protect anyone. His body reacted automatically, placing itself as a barrier between her and any potential threat. And above all, she trusted the fact that he'd had dozens of opportunities to hurt her, to use her as a shield if they were discovered, to take the key to the storage room and lock her inside while he escaped, to do any of the 1,000 cruel things someone truly dangerous would do. And he hadn't done any of them. Not once had he treated her like a disposable tool. Always like a person, like someone whose safety mattered more than his own. These small gestures built trust in a way that words never could, because they revealed who he was when he wasn't trying to convince anyone, when it was just an instinctive reaction, his true character showing through unfiltered. Carter, for his part, saw in her something he hadn't seen in years. Someone who helped without calculating gains, who took risks without expecting reward. In his work, everyone wanted something. Informants wanted money or protection. Witnesses wanted immunity. Partners wanted promotions. There was always an angle, a selfish motivation behind every action. But Mara, she gained nothing from it. She only lost. She risked her own safety, the store, everything. And she did it simply because she thought it was the right thing to do, without asking for anything in return, without even expecting gratitude. When she cleaned his wound for the third time, her hands trembling but determined, refusing to let him do it alone even when he insisted he could, Carter understood something fundamental. She wasn't doing it out of duty. She wasn't doing it because she felt obligated, or because she was afraid of what would happen if she stopped. She was doing it because it was who she was. Because deep down, despite all the exhaustion and hardship life had thrown at her, she still had that fundamental compassion that refused to let someone suffer when she could do something about it. And that destroyed him in a beautiful way, because it made him want to protect her with an intensity that went far beyond any professional oath. It wasn't about duty anymore. It was about not being able to imagine a world where someone like that suffered for doing what was right. "You don't have to do this every day," he said one night when she showed up after closing the shop, visibly exhausted. "I'm feeling better now. I can take care of myself. What if the fever returns? What if the wound gets infected?" She didn't even look at him as she prepared the clean bandages. "Don't be stubborn. You look dead tired." "I always look like this." She finally looked at him, and there was something like tired humor in her eyes. 16 hours a day, remember? Exhaustion is my natural state, but now it's worse. Because of me, my choice. She began changing the bandage with efficient movements that had become practice. "And before you start again with the "you should hand me over and stay safe" speech, no, I'm not going to do that. So save your breath." He almost smiled. "Almost. You're impossible. And you're stubborn. Apparently, we're a good match." She finished bandaging, checking that it was firm but not too tight. "How's the pain?" "Better. Much better." And it was true. The wound was healing well. The fever had completely subsided. In a few more days, he would be able to move without risk of opening the stitches. "I managed to make contact today." She stopped, looking at him intently. "With whom?" "A federal agent I know. Someone from outside, with no connections to the local system. He's coming to get the evidence and get me out of here." Carter paused. "And you too, if you want. Witness protection, new identity, complete fresh start." Mara remained silent for a long moment. "When 48 hours, maybe less. What if I don't want to go? What if I want to stay here, with my life?" Carter looked at her with something resembling pain. "Then you're going to be in danger. Because when they find out I escaped, that I passed the feds' tests, they're going to come after anyone who might have helped me. And you're at the top of that list. But you don't know for sure that they're going to do anything." "Mara." He held her hand, gentle but firm. "I know exactly what they're going to do. I've seen how they operate. They leave no witnesses. They leave no loose ends. If you stay, you die. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, they'll eliminate you. And I won't let that happen. Write this down. That affected me. She looked at his hand holding hers, at the calluses, the old scars, the way he held her firmly, but without hurting her, as if she were precious and at the same time strong enough not to break. "My father," she said finally. "I can't just abandon him. He needs me. We'll take him out too. It's part of the protection. The whole family." Carter leaned forward. "I promise. I'll make sure he gets better medical care than he does now. That you don't have to work 16 hours a day just to survive. That you both have a chance to start over without looking over your shoulder." She wanted to believe. She so badly wanted to believe there was a clean way out of this. But years of disappointment had taught her not to trust promises that seemed too good to be true. What if it goes wrong? What if the feds don't get there in time? What if they find out first? Then I guarantee you'll get out first. That you and your father will be safe, no matter what happens to me. That's not what I meant. She squeezed his hand back. "I'm not just worried about myself. I'm worried about us." And it was in that us, in that simple admission that he had become part of her equation, that Carter felt something tighten in his chest. Something he hadn't felt since his wife died years ago. The possibility of a real connection with someone. Of mattering to someone not out of duty but out of choice. This is where the story begins, to show what is really at stake. The 48 hours that followed were strange. There was temporary relief, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, they would get out of this. Carter was visibly better. He could move without acute pain. The wound had healed well. The fever had completely disappeared. He used the time to plan meticulously. Escape routes. Alternative meeting points. Contingencies for every possible scenario. Mara maintained her normal routine during the day. She opened the shop, served customers, pretended everything was fine. The corrupt men had passed by again, asking questions that were too casual to be casual, but she stuck to her story. She knew nothing. She hadn't seen anything. She was just living her life. At night, when she locked everything up, she would go to the warehouse, and they would talk. Not just about the plan, about the escape, about what would come next, but about real things. About who they were. Before all this. About dreams they had abandoned. About fears they had never admitted to anyone. Carter talked about his wife, whom he had lost to cancer. About how he had thrown himself into work afterward, so as not to feel her absence. About how he had become obsessed with justice, because it was the only thing that still made sense in a world that had taken away the person he loved most. Mara talked about her mother, who had left when she was a child. About how she had taken on responsibilities too early. About how she had given up college, relationships, everything, to take care of her father when he got sick. About how sometimes she felt that her whole life had been a pause, a wait, a sacrifice, and that nothing had ever been left for her. And in those whispered conversations in the darkness of the warehouse, something grew between them. It wasn't idealized romance. It wasn't dramatic passion. It was something deeper and more frightening. It was recognition. It was seeing in the other someone who understood the weight you carried because they carried a similar weight. It was not being alone for the first time in a long time. For a few hours, it almost seemed like they would make it, that the worst was over. That 48 hours were enough to get to the arrival of the feds, without major problems. Mara even started making plans mentally. How she would explain it to her father. What she would take. What it would be like to start over in another place, with a new identity. And then came the final night. 23 hours before the scheduled meeting with the federal agent. She was closing the store, doing the final cash count, when she saw through the windows, lights, several cars arriving from different directions, surrounding the block with military precision. Her heart stopped. She instinctively ducked down, getting out of the line of sight from the windows. And she saw the men get out of the cars. They weren't uniformed police officers. They were the same ones who had come before. The fake investigators. Only now there were more of them. Many more. And they weren't pretending to ask casual questions. They were invading. She ran to the warehouse, panic finally breaking the forced calm she had maintained for days. "Carter, they're here." several of them, surrounding everything. He was already standing when she entered, gun in hand, fully alert. How many? 6 cars. Maybe more. Carter cursed under his breath. They found out. Someone leaked information or tracked my contact with the feds. He began to move, checking for possible exits. Is there a back exit? Yes, but it leads to the side street. They'll have it covered. Roof, difficult access, and we are left exposed. He thought quickly, his training taking over. So we hold position here. This room only has one entrance, thick walls. They'll have to come through that door, and that gives us a tactical advantage. He looked at her. But Mara, you need to get out. Now, through the side. Run as fast as you can. I'll hold them here long enough for you to escape. The word came out firmly, definitively. Carter looked at her as if he were seeing for the first time how much she had changed since that night she opened the warehouse door. She was no longer the exhausted woman just trying to survive another day. She was someone who had found something worth fighting for. Mara, there's no time to discuss this. Then don't argue. I'm staying. She grabbed something heavy from the shelf, an iron bar she used to open locked boxes. It wasn't a weapon, but it would do. You can't hold them off alone, and I'm not going to let you die trying to save me. Carter wanted to argue. He wanted to use authority, training, anything to make her obey. But there was no time, because outside, they heard it. Voices, coordination, the sound of men positioning themselves for a tactical invasion. Okay, he said quickly. Stay behind those boxes. If you shoot, duck. Don't try to be a hero. Just survive. He checked the gun, counted the remaining bullets. There weren't many. And Mara, countryside. If I fall, you run. Don't look back. Don't try to help me. Just run. Promise. She made no promises. She simply positioned herself behind the makeshift barricade of crates, gripping the iron bar with trembling hands that didn't let go. The first shots came without warning. The warehouse door exploded open, wood shattering. Carter responded immediately. Training, taking complete control. 3 precise shots. 2 men fell. The third retreated, yelling for the others to retreat as well. Tense silence. Then, a voice, familiar. One of the detectives who had come to the store. Hayes, we know you're there, and we know the girl is with you. The voice was calm, almost friendly, which made it all the more terrifying. It doesn't have to be like this. Hand over the evidence, walk out with your hands up, and leave her alone. She doesn't have to die. Because of your choices. Carter didn't answer. He knew it was a lie. They knew they both needed to die now. Witnesses, evidence, problems that needed to be eliminated. You're making her suffer, Hayes. You're condemning an innocent woman because of your stubbornness. Is this what heroes do? The voice paused. Or, you can make it easier. Go out alone. Let us resolve this quickly. And she lives. You have my word. Mara looked at Carter, seeing the conflict in his face. She knew what he was thinking, he was considering, weighing whether sacrificing himself would save her, and she couldn't let him do that. Don't believe him, she whispered. He's lying, I know. Carter kept his eyes on the destroyed door. But what if it isn't? What if it's the only chance? No, it isn't. You know it isn't. Before Carter could answer, the voice returned. 10 seconds, Hayes, then we go in shooting, and we won't be careful. So think carefully. Is it worth dying for pride? Carter looked at Mara, at the woman who had saved him when she shouldn't have, who had risked everything out of pure kindness, who deserved a whole life ahead of her filled with good things the world had never given her. And then he looked at the door, at the men on the other side who had sold everything that badges were supposed to represent, and he made the decision. Okay, he shouted, I'm leaving. But leave her alone. She doesn't know anything. Carter, no. Mara grabbed his arm, but he gently pulled away. Trust me, he whispered. Then, louder, I'm leaving. Gun on the ground. Don't shoot. He placed the gun on the ground, raised his hands, and began to move toward the door. Mara felt her heart shatter. He was sacrificing himself. He was doing exactly what she had asked him not to do. But then, she saw it. The look he gave her. It wasn't goodbye. It was instruction. It was prepare. And she understood. He had a plan. She didn't know what it was, but she trusted him. Carter exited through the destroyed door, his hands still in the air. The men immediately surrounded him, guns drawn. "Where's the evidence?" the detective asked. "Hidden in a place only I know." Carter kept his voice calm. "Let her go. I'll take you there later. Either we torture you until you talk. You can try. But I've already been through endurance training. It's going to take time. And every minute that passes is a minute that the feds could be arriving." The detective considered it. And in that moment of hesitation, when everyone's attention was on Carter, Mara saw her chance. She moved silently, picking up the gun Carter had left on the floor, and waited. Carter saw her movement out of the corner of his eye, and smiled, very slightly. Then he looked back at the detective. "Last chance. Let her go, and I'll cooperate. Or we'll do this the hard way. There's no easy way out. You lost." The detective raised his own gun. "And she's going to die too. But at least you'll see it before you go." And that's when everything exploded. Carter threw himself aside, yelling "now," and Mara fired. She didn't hit anyone, but it caused enough confusion. Men ducked for cover. And in that chaos, Carter grabbed the gun from the nearest man and started shooting back. The warehouse turned into a war zone. Bullets ricocheted, screams, confusion. And in the middle of it all, Carter and Mara fought side by side, protecting each other, surviving second by second. She hit a man on the run, thinking she was protecting someone from the law. But when she discovered he wasn't running from the law, that he was the law itself, trying to survive his own corrupt colleagues, she understood the hidden truth that changed everything. The real danger didn't come from the man she saved. It came from discovering that sometimes badges protect criminals, and good people die because they trusted the system. And now, to survive, she would have to trust the only police officer who still deserved the title, while all the others came to kill them, protecting each other with a synchronicity that shouldn't exist between two people who have known each other for such a short time. But it existed, because they had been forged together under pressure. They had learned to trust, not with words, but with actions. And now, when it mattered more than ever, that trust was the only thing keeping them both alive. Carter positioned himself in front of her, using his own body as a shield, while firing with surgical precision. Every shot counted. Every bullet had to be valuable. Mara covered the angles he couldn't, shouting warnings when she saw movement, using the iron bar to disarm a man who tried to enter from the side. And then, when it seemed there was no way out, when Carter's bullets were running out and the men kept coming, they heard it. Sirens, lots of them, coming from all directions, and they weren't local sirens. It was a different sound. Federer. The agent Carter had contacted hadn't waited the 48 hours. He'd come earlier, and he'd brought a full force. The corrupt men realized it at the same time. Hesitation was immediate. Some tried to retreat. Others fired more desperately, trying to finish the job before help arrived. But it was too late. The store's front door exploded open, and federal agents entered in perfect tactical formation, shouting commands, identifying targets. The shootout ended as quickly as it began. The corrupt men were subdued, disarmed, handcuffed, and in the midst of it all, Carter and Mara stood there, still holding their weapons, still processing the fact that they had survived. A man in a suit approached, federal badge visible. "Sheriff Hayes." Carter nodded, slowly lowering his weapon. "Agent Morrison." "Same here. Sorry for the delay. When I found out they had tracked your contact, I mobilized everything I could and came straight here." He looked around at the destroyed warehouse, the bodies, the chaos. "Looks like we arrived almost too late." "Almost," Carter agreed, looking at Mara, but not completely. Morrison followed his gaze. "Is that the witness?" "This is Mara, and she's not just a witness. She's the reason I'm alive. The reason any of this worked. Carter approached her, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. And I need her and her father to have complete protection. Witness protection program. Fresh start. Everything. It's already being arranged, Morrison assured them. We'll get you out of here. Safe place. Testimony can wait until tomorrow, when you've rested. And so it was. Amidst the destruction, surrounded by federal agents and handcuffed men who had tried to kill them minutes before, that Carter finally released the breath he seemed to have been holding since it all began. They had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. Mara looked around the destroyed store. Years of work, of sacrifice, all ruined in a single night. But strangely, she didn't feel loss. She felt liberation. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't trapped in the routine that suffocated her. She was free to choose, free to start over, and she wasn't doing it alone. Carter held her hand as they were escorted out, and in that simple touch was a silent promise that what they had built under pressure, in the darkness, with fear and danger surrounding them, would not end just because the danger had passed. It was only the beginning. Because some stories begin with an ending, with destruction, with everything crumbling, and then, from the ashes, they build something new, something stronger, something worth every scar, every sleepless night, every moment of terror. And this was one of those stories. If stories about people who choose to fight, even when it would be easier to give up, about protection that arises when you least expect it, about connections forged in fire, and that emerge stronger because of it resonate with you. Subscribe to Heart of Protection Stories. This channel exists precisely for that, to tell stories that touch something real inside us, that show that courage is not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. Comment below. I'm with you until the end, because I want to know if this journey resonated with you in the same way it resonates with me when I tell my story. And if any part of this story made you feel something real. If you held your breath at any point. If you rooted for them even knowing it was fiction, leave a like. It's a simple way to show that stories like this matter, that feelings like this matter. And look, there's a video right here that delves even deeper into this type of protection, this type of choice that changes everything. Just click and continue with me there. The story never ends when it's made of true feeling.